All right, so this is the April 2024 board briefing recap for DISD. All of the trustees were in attendance. They discussed EA local instructional goals and objectives, which is an annual report, environment and climate resolution update, and then the proposed budget for next year. So this is the annual report. A lot of this data has been shared in different places in previous months, but this is their annual report that showcases kind of the CCMR metrics altogether. One important thing to note is that this data is lagged by a year, so it actually pertains to last year's graduating class, and that estimate is still waiting to be verified by TEA. So the first metric was on percentage of students who are TSI met. District said they were progressing in this goal. They increased from 2022 to 2023, but they don't think they're going to meet their target. Metric number 2 was on industry-based certifications. The district thinks that they will exceed their target, so they said they're on track. Number 3 was on level 1 and level 2 certificates. Again, they're anticipating they will exceed their target, so on track. Number 4 is related to FAFSA and TASFA completion. This number, they actually do know from last year, was 96%. So they're on track with that metric. FAFSA and TASFA completion is a graduation requirement. So that's why they think, this number is so high. And then finally, the percentage of graduates enrolled in post-secondary institutions. The district thinks that they will be progressing in this goal, not quite meeting their target. Some of the strategic adjustments: college prep courses, embedded curriculum supports in English 3 and Algebra 2 to support TSIA testing. Pathway managers that ensure that programs of study are complete at each campus, meaning a student can progress all the way through a path and earn that certification. College career and advising program advisors to support students in the summer after graduation, and registration-ready drives to promote enrollment at Dallas College. So all of these metrics are created to support students' enrollment and success in post-secondary institutions and the workforce after they graduate from DISD. Trustee Foreman wanted to know if students can receive certifications from their campuses, not just career institutes. They said yes. Also wanted to know the percentage of seniors currently enrolled at career institutes, if they are on track to receive certifications. The district's report showed all the data disaggregated by student group. She did mention that she knows that white students have the lowest completion of FAFSA and TASFA, but have the highest percentage of post-secondary enrollment. And then she wanted to know if there are goals related to certifications earned at Career Institute. The goal of the district is that every student enrolled at a Career Institute would earn at least one certification. Trustee White wanted to know how the district keeps track of students after graduation. So those college and career advisors help students with that transition during the summer, and there's also a team dedicated to alumni tracking. Trustee Johnson wanted to know how much are CTE programs at campuses supported. So those programs are fully resourced. They think that any student in a CTE program has the resources to be able to earn those certifications. Trustee Mackey wanted to know the expected percentage for TSI Met seniors for this year's graduating class. They project that 32% of seniors will be TSI Met. Also asked, how does the district ensure that FAFSA, TASFA completion is not just a box that students check? So support from counselors, those college and career advisors, and they do expect to see that number even increase in the next couple of months. What percentage of graduates enroll in 2 versus 4-year institutions? So 32% enroll in 4-year institutions, 16% enroll in 2-year institutions. Something that came up in this line of questioning is that students who earn associate's degrees during high school, so while they're DISD students, so if they're enrolled in PTech, for example, if they immediately enter the workforce, they are not captured in this data of students entering post-secondary institutions, even though technically they earned an associate's degree, so basically the equivalent of a 2-year institution, they're not captured in this data. And then what is the district doing to increase enrollment in Dallas College? So those registration-ready drives, there's success coaches from Dallas College present at those drives to help with enrollment. And the district is going to see the success of those drives in November when they get the enrollment figures from Dallas College. Trustee Mitchke wanted to know what accounts for growth in earned industry-based certification. So encouraging students to still test for exams, even if they're not enrolled in the particular course, if they feel confident that they can pass, to still test for them. And then how much outcomes-based funding will the district receive if 63% of graduates earn certification? So they don't know the exact number because it's dependent on the percentage of economically disadvantaged students who earn the certifications, also other factors based off of student groups. So there are different amounts related to students who are special ed, economically disadvantaged, African American, et cetera. So they don't have that actual number. And then he asked about kind of the equity of if a district with no economically disadvantaged students, do they have an easier time maximizing outcomes-based funding? So they did say there is a strong correlation between affluence and performance on these metrics. To qualify, students have to be TSI met and also enroll in post-secondary institution or earn a credential. So students have to have those two criteria to be able to qualify for outcomes-based funding. Trustee Karen just wanted more information on comparison to urban districts for TSI met students, breakdown of the types of certifications obtained, and then also a breakdown by campus for post-secondary enrollment. Superintendent's report was on environment and climate resolution. This was a resolution passed in 2020 by the board unanimously. The district's report is very, very comprehensive, shows like all the goals. Some of the ones that they really highlighted were replacing all the water fountains with units that have lead-free filters and also installing lead-free bottle filling stations. Also, the district obtained 17 electric school buses. They are planning on purchasing more with an additional grant. And then the past 4 years since this resolution was passed, almost 10% reduction in water use, 97% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, and natural gas reduction of almost 28%. Progressing goals, so they talked about remodels and new builds being net zero ready, so not exactly net zero. And they just talked about how constructing buildings to be net zero, the actual construction would cost more than they anticipate in savings, so it doesn't make sense. But when the energy contract renews, they will reevaluate those net zero ready campuses and see if they want to convert them. They also talked about the 21.4% diversion rate of recycling. Their goal is 50%. They introduced compostable plates. They talked about the introduction of utensils and trash bags that are compostable. Currently, it's cost prohibitive. And then 13% canopy coverage. So literally like the amount of trees and shade on a campus. Their goal is 50%, but they do anticipate that number will increase when the new trees that are planted eventually mature. So since this resolution was passed, they made a comparison that it's the equivalent of over 160,000 cars not being driven for a year. And then the renewable energy contract has saved the district almost $20 million since 2020. Trustee Mackey wanted to know how students are engaged in this work. So they are going to revisit these goals. They do want to revisit these goals with a student lens. So they talked about utilizing the Dallas Teen School Board. What is the lower wattage usage attributed to? So they talked about infrastructure upgrades, especially for older buildings that have, leaking faucets or pipes, energy efficient equipment, lower flow fixtures, and has the district explored funding opportunities through the Inflation Reduction Act? So yes, they're also exploring rebates, additional grants. Trustee White asked about the maintenance costs of electric buses. So there'll definitely be a reduction in cost when compared to gas-fueled buses. And that's just because with these electric buses, they don't have the same maintenance requirements like oil changes, et cetera. And then how does a campus convert from net zero ready to net zero? So they are converted with solar panels. And again, they're going to reevaluate in 2030 when their energy contract renews to see how many campuses it would make sense to convert. Trustee Karen asked about if the replacement of the water fountains has already been completed, and it has. He also asked about canopy coverage specifically for campuses that are not new construction and don't have major renovations planned. So they said that they partner with Texas Trees Foundation, Cool Schools, Dallas Mavericks to be able to support those campuses with canopy coverage. And then the final presentation was on the proposed budget. So next year's projected student enrollment is about 137 million or 137,000 students. Their projected revenue is about $1.7 billion. That is a decrease in revenue of 125 million, which is about 7%. Their projected budget is almost 1.9 billion. That is a decrease of $143 million from last year's budget. Again, about 7% decrease. They project $60 million in recapture payment. This is a reduction from last year's budget of about $163 million. And then the report itself had all of the functions or kind of line items and showed what is being spent where and what, reductions there are, what additions there are. Some of the main things that they discussed was for instruction, continuing compensation increases, and in order to balance that out, continuing position reductions specifically at the central office level. For instructional resources and media services, adding librarians to campuses, this would amount to about 87 full-time employees, which would be about a $6 million increase. For guidance, counseling, and evaluation, adding mental health clinicians, which is a $14 million increase, and social work services, adding reset center staff, which is about a $4.5 million increase. So this is the projected revenue, projected budget, and the chart at the bottom. And ultimately, it means the district will adopt a deficit budget. The deficit is about $187 million. After they adopt that, the projected fund balance is projected to be $553 million. The report also had compensation details. It showed, based off of TEI, what teachers are expected to make. The main priorities are ensuring market competitive salaries, proposing a $16.50 minimum wage, and continuing the HPC stipends. The minimum starting teacher salary would be about $62,000. And then this chart shows the breakdown for teachers, principals, campus support staff, central staff, and the total amount of those increases. So there's a proposed deficit budget due to decreased state funding, and they'll be prioritizing teacher and support staff compensation, as well as adding campus-based roles. So Trustee White asked about the current market level for principals. So it depends on if the principal is at an elementary, middle, or high school campus. It had said elementary assistant principals are most behind market level. Do those principals receive bonuses? So they would have qualified for ESSER funded retention incentive, but the district doesn't have that moving forward because they don't have ESSER. And then how's the team that performs safety and security audits funded? So that actually, Region 10 performs those evaluations and the district doesn't incur that cost. Trustee Mackey asked about in 2 years for 2025 to 2026, if the fund balance is significantly depleted by that time, will the district have to make another, $186 million in cuts? So yes, potentially the district basically just said that they would have to make some choices and evaluate things really strategically, because if the state does not pass additional funding and student enrollment does not increase, will continue to eat at the district's fund balance. And the district has to maintain a fund balance of 3 months of operating expenses. Trustee Foreman asked why there's a deficit if the tax base has grown. So the district is generating less, even though property values are increasing, because the tax rate itself is decreasing. Current M&O tax rate for this year was 0.7718. She also wanted to know why the budget for supply and materials has increased if the student population has decreased. So previously, they used ESSER funds to support instructional materials. It was about $21 million. The district, as a total, has had to reallocate about $263 million of ESSER funds that were previously distributed. And now they have to absorb that into the general operating fund. So total cost of librarians, $6 million. So no, the majority of it would be hiring full-time employees, librarians, but there are some other costs. And then why is the budget for instructional leadership increasing? So reset center, tutoring, dyslexia support positions, those are previously funded by ESSER. They also talked about the reset center positions. They cross more than one function dependent on if it's a manager or coordinator role. And then do they anticipate the state giving additional funding for security? So no, there is a small amount that the state does fund for security, but they don't anticipate any additional funding. What function did the career advisors come from prior to ESSER? So it came from the line item or function guidance, counseling, and evaluation. After ESSER was distributed, they added about $10 million in career and college advisors. Is the $14 million increase for guidance, counseling, and evaluation just supporting staff? So about 12 million will support college access providers, which was previously supported by ESSER. And then the remaining 2 to 3 million will support expansion of high school counselors as their projected grant funding. So yes, they project $140 million in grants and other funding. When was the last time the district adopted a deficit budget? So last year, the district adopted a deficit budget. Prior to that, they were unsure if the district had ever adopted a deficit budget. She talked about stipends and how they need to be included in overall compensation when kind of the district shows these numbers, and just like what stipends there are in general. So there's a full list. They said that, you know, it's very comprehensive, but some examples they shared were bilingual, ESL, critical shortage hiring stipends for math, science, special education, inclusion. She said that she appreciated the increase in community service funding, but the budget does need to prioritize campuses instead of central administration, and they should use the fund balance to support campuses so campuses don't have to make those cuts. And then Trustee Carrion just talked about the current basic allotment per student is $6,160 from the state. He asked, what if that allotment had been adjusted for inflation? So it would have been about $7,200 to $7,300. So an increase about $1,100, consistent with inflation, but legislature did not do that. So then he asked, what would the basic allotment need to be to maintain a flat budget? So they said an increase of $1,100. So if the allotment was adjusted for inflation, they anticipate that they would have had a flat budget instead of a deficit budget. And then Trustee Flores just emphasized out of Trustee Carrion's point that the district is heavily affected by inflation. They also have an unfunded security mandate. They talked about the state only supports about a third of that or less of a third than that in their funding. So these are the reasons why there might be a deficit. Inflation is not necessarily reflected in that state funding. And so the school districts feel it a lot more. And that was the April meeting.